Alright, I finally made it to the Valley Beyond. Hey, what are all you guys doing here?
It's a coincidence.
I have a deadly virus.
You know, I have a feeling this episode is going to take everything out of me.
You can do it, Brandon.
Alright, game face.
And so our episode opens with Dolores recreating Arnold as Bernard in the Cradle based on all of the past experiences that she and Arnold shared together.
Ugh, now that the whole process of recreating people has been revealed, I can once again say how absolutely dumb the idea of creating people based on your experiences is. Look, the whole hat brain scanner thing cleared everything up for everybody else, but Arnold never had a scan of his brain, and Dolores only spent a handful of years with him listening to him talk. In the grand scheme of things, that doesn't mean shit. Dolores wasn't with him for decades before that, and we know that psychologically these early years are of extreme importance. In fact, we call them the formative years. Did he tell her everything about his life? Everything? Because people have all sorts of very salient experiences that they don't talk about. Maybe he found a dead raccoon in the woods when he was 10. Maybe he was bullied when he was 12. Maybe he saw a scary movie about clowns when he was 8. Maybe when he was first with a woman, he didn't really know where the clitoris was. People have all sorts of essential experiences that they never talk about because they're weird, painful, or embarrassing. Not to mention, there's all sorts of contemporary information that she wouldn't be privy to. What's his bathroom routine? What kind of porn does he look at? Does his personality completely change when he's around his parents? What about his wife? How does he act around children? Dolores knows none of this. And yes, in the end, she claims that Bernard is slightly different from Arnold, but only slightly. I'm not even sure why this plot point was added. I mean, yes, we were all shocked the first time we found out that Dolores was the interviewer, but in the end, what exactly was the point? How did it change the story?
We then get to various characters heading to the Valley Beyond and in a series of ridiculous coincidences, arriving at roughly the same time. We start with Bernard, whose timeline on arriving to the Valley is determined pretty much by chance. He runs out of gas, affecting his ETA by hours. Of course, this allows him to arrive within minutes of everyone else. By the way, the whole gas thing is pretty stupid of him. He was wandering for half a day in the mesa and couldn't spend 5 minutes searching for a car with gas? Also, Elsie couldn't have checked the cars with all that spare time she had? She really did nothing in that garage? We then come to Dolores, wasting time with Teddy's body, but wasting the perfect amount of time so that she can arrive within minutes of Bernard. And we also find out that hosts have bulletproof brains that pretty much perfectly preserve them after death, so any and all of that crying or worrying about Maeve, or Teddy, or Sakura, or anyone really, is completely and utterly unfounded. We can maybe mourn Angela and Major Craddock who are blown up, and maybe some hosts who were made crazy like Clementine and Abernathy, but essentially every other host is still alive and fine. You can just print them a new body and pop their brain inside. Oh, and by the way, speaking of brains, we never got an explanation of who these other cupcake brains were for, or these trays of 50 sets of eyes. Were they all for James Delos? They were preparing decades of James Delos copies right then and there? If not, who is all this for? Dolores finally heads out and takes the same sand dune path that Akichita took to Logan's tree and the Valley Beyond. By the way, the show seems to have retconned where Logan was sent off to the edge of the park. First season, it was implied that his journey was beyond Escalante, but this season has showed the Men in Black heading on a reverse trip, and from there, to Pariah and Las Mudas inward, and then outward again to a different edge of the park. So I guess first season, William must have done the same with Logan.
So Dolores then, by sheer luck, runs into the Man in Black, who is somehow not dying from bleeding out after gashing his arm in. He has been shot 6 times in the past week, including once in the stomach, and now has a massive wound in his arm. The man is simply indestructible. Dolores mentions that she came across Emily's body. I guess she can recognize her despite Emily not having come to Westworld since childhood. And then, for no reason, Dolores and the Man in Black team up to go to the Valley Beyond. No reason. None. The writers didn't even try to establish a motivation here. The last time these two met, they tried to murder each other. And the Man in Black is someone who would regularly rape her. Why would these two ride together? Why? It's like these two sensed that there was a season finale and that they needed to do something together. Even when filming, Ed Harris asked, "Why the fuck am I riding with Dolores?" I don't know, Ed. I don't know. Of course, Dolores doesn't really trust the Man in Black and somehow jams a misshapen bullet into his gun. I'm not sure how the hell that was done. Super strength?
We then get to Akechita's group, who, at this opportune time, has decided to head to the Valley Beyond. And I have no idea why.
The reason is 'cause Ford planned it all.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that implication. I get that all the hosts were talking about the Valley Beyond, whether it be a stable hand or Major Craddock or Kichita. Not to mention later in the episode, Forge Logan tells Bernard that he visits all the time and that he created the Valley Beyond. But there are a bunch of things that are really weird about this whole setup. Akichita believed in the Valley Beyond for decades, long before Ford's scheming or even before Bernard's creation. Somehow, after listening to Logan and looking at a pit, Akichita knew that the technology of the Forge could be used to create a virtual afterlife. Somehow. I guess he's a genius seer? But then Ford puts that same exact notion of a Valley Beyond in everyone else. Perhaps he took the idea from Akichita? But even if we assume that Ford planned it all and it was inspired by Akichita's genius, how did they know to gather at this moment? Was it part of the Wyatt storyline? To wait for Dolores to get Abernathy's key to bring it to the Forge? But that plan would rely on Charlotte and Lee putting the key in Abernathy. But that only happened right before the incident, and it was completely illogical since brain balls are small and didn't need Abernathy. And it was just completely random and lucky that Dolores' dad was chosen by Charlotte. And it was also completely random and lucky that Abernathy was captured by the Confederados and brought to Dolores. It's only at that point that Dolores even finds out about the encryption key. I mean, for Ford to program the hosts to wait for Dolores would mean that somehow he knew that Charlotte was going to randomly choose Dolores' dad, and that Dolores' dad would be randomly picked up and brought to Dolores. Not to mention how convenient as fuck it is for both the programmer of the Valley Beyond, Bernard, and the key holder, Dolores, to get there at the same time. Otherwise, there's no Valley Beyond. It actually makes my brain hurt to think about how convolutedly lucky this all is.
We then get to Charlotte, who tells her men to step on it despite them following a horse. It should be pointed out that Clementine's zombie virus was actually designed to deal with the masked men who are all dead. They shouldn't even know about Akichita's group, which the virus is eventually used on. Their mission is supposed to be to stop Dolores, something they don't even try to do.
We then get back to Maeve's plot, where we find out the tech likes to torture hosts for some reason. He very slowly tries to do his job and is naturally killed for his pace. Conveniently, Maeve's crew arrives at this time, and they conveniently run into Lee, and then Maeve uses her powers to control an army of bulls for a Super Bowl ad.
We then get back to Dolores and the Man in Black, who have caught up with Akichita. The Man in Black again declares that he wants to destroy the Forge with no real explanation. He claims it's to prove he has a choice, but I'm not sure how destroying the Forge achieves that. We then get to Bernard, who has made it to the Forge but is stopped by security. With perfect timing, Dolores and the Man in Black appear to kill the security guards. Of course, it's all headshots and machine guns are nothing against revolvers. William is a bit confused on who Bernard is and is told that he's a recreation of Arnold, and William makes a quip about Ford creating Bernard, only for Dolores to correct him and say that she built him. Of course, this goes against everything last season where we specifically saw Ford build Bernard and instruct him on how to act, and I'm not sure what this retcon actually adds to the story. Then, all of a sudden, with just as much logic as their alliance, the Man in Black turns on Dolores because the door was open. The Man in Black is suddenly unable to make headshots, and then we get this weird gun-jamming backfire incident that blows off his hand. Again, I have no idea how Dolores jammed this misshapen bullet into a barrel to make the gun backfire. William falls to the ground in pain, and this is actually the last time we see him for days until Stubbs finds him. I have no idea how he didn't drown in the flood. Maybe he somehow got to an island, but even in that case, I don't see how he didn't bleed out and die after getting no medical attention for days. And since this is effectively the end of the William storyline in this timeline, I have to ask, why the fuck did Ford want William to find the door? Was that question ever answered? And what did the Man in Black add to any plotline? Just like in first season, the Man in Black story was once again a complete waste of time. His plot is essentially wandering around dealing with randoms and then killing his daughter. He had absolutely no impact on the plot. Even Maeve's shooting was really from Ghost Nation chasing her and having Delos security shoot her. The Man in Black had nothing to do with that even. Besides the backstory stuff, we could remove the Man in Black and absolutely everything would be exactly the same. He was utterly pointless.
We then jump to the later timeline with Strand taking Bernard to the Valley Beyond. Some more guests are identified and Stubbs wants to go rescue them and gets angry about it. Of course, this incredible love for human life makes me again wonder what happened to that other batch of humans he was with earlier in the season. The crew takes some boats across the partially drained valley, and we can see some bodies here, implying that this whole area was flooded. So again, we don't know how the Man in Black got back. Bernard spots his car and they set up some satellite equipment and then take the elevator down. And then we go back in time to Dolores and Bernard in the Forge. Now, interestingly, there's no security down here other than a few drone hosts. This is all frankly baffling. The entire Delos story of Season 1 was Teresa and Charlotte frightened about Ford breaking his toys, and thus they wanted to get out information through first the woodcutter and then Abernathy. This season we find out that the information turned out to be an encryption key, and the actual prize that Delos wanted to protect was the guest's data, which is all physically right here in the park. It's all perfectly accessible and perfectly destroyable by Ford whether or not he had an encryption key. All he had to do was send in some hosts with some explosives. So Teresa and Charlotte's whole mission first season was completely and utterly pointless. There was no insurance if Ford wanted to break his toys. And frankly, the encryption key, which I guess Teresa made, I'm not sure, just made everything harder on Delos. Had they not made it, Strand's tactical force would have just come earlier to secure the park. The only reason they delayed is because Charlotte didn't have the key. This is all a bit like trying to protect a tablet from a violent toddler by password protecting it. The toddler can still smash it. You should probably worry about either getting the information off the tablet or protecting the tablet. Worrying about passwords seems like a really big waste of time.
We then flash forward to Strand, who has 6 soldiers with him. Dolores later only kills 3, but whatever. And Strand mentions that there are 4 million human copies in the Forge, which makes me wonder how many guests have been to Westworld. 4 million copies means 133,000 unique visitors a year, or 2,500 unique visitors a week. But there are only 2,000 hosts. Are there more guests than hosts in the park at any given time? The group then finds Dolores' dead body and wants to know what happened, but Bernard can't say. Of course, they could just remove Dolores' brain and check what happened like they did in the first episode with the Ghost Nation dude. That seems like the logical thing to do, and had they done that, they would have discovered that Dolores' brain wasn't there. We then go back in time and Dolores declares that she wants the information in the Forge to figure out how to destroy humanity. And so she goes into the Forge and invites Bernard along for no reason. And Bernard, who said his entire mission was to stop Dolores, decides not to disable Dolores right here and now, and instead goes into the Forge as well. By the way, isn't it kind of weird that the Cradle, a host depository which I imagine regularly has hosts connected to it, has one skull-cracking port? Meanwhile, the Forge, a depository for human experience with no need for host access, has multiple non-skull-cracking ports. The two then enter James Delos' baseline Westworld, which is interesting and all, but a load of nonsense. Why on earth would they be walking through Delos simulations? Later on, Forge Logan even says that they've already perfected Delos' mind. So why the additional simulations? Bernard also weirdly says that sanity is a narrow band of behavior and that most states of consciousness are insane, which seems to go against the empirical evidence of this planet where nearly all creatures are sane. The two explore some more and then find Forge Logan, who is James Delos' memory of him but is also the voice of the Forge for some reason. I mean, I love me some Logan and Ben Barnes, but why is Logan the face of the Forge?
Forge Logan decides to give a tour and begins to ramble to Bernard about a whole bunch of subjects that are entertaining, but don't really explain anything and have no impact on the story. We find out that James Delos was in fact perfected, but his physical body kept breaking down. We still have no idea why it kept breaking down. We are presented with James Delos' main drive, which is that he will do anything for Logan, but then he contradicts this when his son comes to him for help, but he doesn't help him. And all versions of James Delos did this. So it seems that Delos was lying to himself on a deep fundamental level. But then Bernard says that Delos had no choice, no free will. And then Forge Logan tells us that the best humans can do is follow their basic code, and their basic code is incredibly short. James Delos was failing not because he wasn't complicated enough, but because he wasn't simple enough.
Yeah, so maybe I'm an idiot, but I don't understand what the fuck they're talking about here. I mean, the big reveal seems to be that humans don't have free will and are super basic as opposed to hosts who are complicated and may have free will. Okay, fine, but how does that frigging explain James Delos? If humans are super basic, that is simpler than hosts, why are they contradicting their core drives? And if humans are super simple, why are they rejecting their bodies? We don't really have an explanation for this. Delos was rejecting his body 3 weeks ago, but Forge Logan acts like everything's been answered and shuffles the conversation forward.
We then get to Maeve's crew, who has made incredible progress and is now only a mile from the valley beyond. But security is on their tail. We then get back to the Forge where we pass by the Man in Black and a bunch of images of things that happened to hosts first season. I'm not sure why Felix programming Maeve or Maeve freaking out would be in here, as it has nothing to do with guest experiences. Forge Logan also tells us that it's Bernard and not Ford who has been coming here repeatedly to set up the valley beyond.
Bernard planned it all? Huh?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's hard to accept that Bernard was coming here independent of Ford. But by the way, wasn't there an agreement between Ford and William not to interfere with each other? Ford claims that William broke the agreement, though I have no idea how, but it seems like Ford, for years, has been sending Bernard here to the Forge. Ford was definitely the one breaking the agreement.
Anyway, Dolores finds all of the human programming and gets to reading. We are told that Bernard specifically ordered the Forge to allow her to do this. Akecheta's crew then makes it to where the door should be, but it hasn't opened yet, and his number 2 is worried about dying, but Akecheta assures him that they've died countless times. Well, maybe his number 2 has.
And then we get to the security guys attacking Maeve. Hector is about to sacrifice himself when Lee steps in instead. And in one of the dumbest sacrifices of all time, Lee dies finally reciting his speech. He honestly bought Maeve like 30 seconds. Surrendering probably would have bought them much more.
Back in the Forge, Dolores is reading about Carl Strand, while Bernard and Forge Logan open the door to a virtual heaven. We flash to everyone seeing the door and find out that somehow Charlotte has gotten behind Maeve. I mean, they left later and were on horseback, but whatever. Felix and Sylvester can't see the door, proving once and for all that they're human. I guess every stupid thing they did for a season was really their doing. The hosts start running into the creepy virtual heaven, but Dolores decides that all the virtual humans need to be deleted, as well as the virtual heaven.
The humans, armed with Clementine, then arrive and forget that their mission was to stop Dolores from getting to the Forge. And for some reason Elsie is there. I guess they picked her up. She doesn't add anything to the scene. So to Charlotte and company, this should all be a waste of time. The hosts appear to be orderly committing suicide off the side of a cliff. The humans can't see the door, remember? So instead of searching for Dolores, their mission, they decide to infect a bunch of hosts that are killing themselves. Fantastic plan, Charlotte. Armistice ends up killing Clementine, but the damage is done and the virus is out. And then we get to the Man in Black and who fucking knows. And then Dolores wants to kill everyone and Bernard wants to stop her. And then back to this fucking mess. And then Bernard says that this isn't a dream, this is a fucking nightmare. I couldn't agree more. Meanwhile, at the zombie apocalypse, everyone is just standing around like idiots. Despite being 30 feet from the door, Bizarro, Maeve, and Maeve's daughter are standing there and doing nothing. Maeve honestly has to tell them to run. And then we get one last fucking flashback.
What? Maeve has a daughter? I didn't know that.
Bizarro, Maeve, and Maeve's daughter finally decide to run their 30 feet. Maeve decides to freeze everyone as if that matters. They only had to go 30 feet. But whatever, they make it into the Valley Beyond, and Maeve is shot. And then in the Valley Beyond, Akecheta runs into his girlfriend. I guess he can recreate her with his mind or something? I mean, the real Akecheta's girlfriend should have been released during the rebellion, but we don't know where she went. She certainly wasn't with the group or Akecheta would have seen her. This thing is clearly just some hallucination that Akecheta can use to masturbate for an eternity. Anyway, back with Bernard, he's able to save maybe a fifth of the humans, as well as the Valley Beyond. And then there's this fucking shit.
Back at the door, Charlotte's crew is wasting time killing hosts that were about to kill themselves. Again, they're supposed to be stopping Dolores. Bernard runs into Elsie, who says that lives were at stake. Which I don't understand. They came across a bunch of hosts who were jumping off a cliff, and they introduced a virus into them. If lives were at stake, it had to do with Dolores, the person they forgot about. Anyway, the valley starts flooding, and so they have to go back to the mesa. By the way, here it's revealed that the flooding is part of the failsafe mechanism for the Forge. But back in episode 1, Strand's crew is completely baffled by the appearance of the lake. Back at the mesa, Bernard is angry at Elsie for helping Charlotte, even though Elsie literally did nothing. But Elsie said she had to because the hosts were out of control. They were walking off a cliff. Elsie tells Bernard to stay put, and then Charlotte mentions that Carl Strand is coming in 12 hours. That's a bit weird, as in the first episode we find out that Carl Strand's arrival is 11 days after Dolores and Teddy's face-off with Ghost Nation. This episode has taken place over 10 days? How? Anyway, Elsie then reveals to Charlotte that she knows all about the Human Host Project, which does explain why Bernard didn't want her to go into the room with James Delos. The knowledge gets her killed. Charlotte brazenly kills Elsie in front of all of these windows, and Bernard sees the whole thing.
We then flash forward and find that Bernard has geniusly hid the encryption key in Dolores' head, where they should have been looking in the first place. And then we go back with Bernard hallucinating Ford being there, complete with poetic Anthony Hopkins jibber-jabber. Bernard starts his plan, but somehow he had the foresight to take Dolores' brain with him, and starts building a body. He has access to this lab, despite last episode it being established that his access privileges were taken away. In the forward timeline, Charlotte's body is able to kill Strand, the tech, and 3 guards, and she's able to make 3 other guards disappear into thin air. And we find out that Charlotte's body is actually Dolores. She killed Charlotte and replaced her. Charlotte should probably be running away at this point. That's what I do when people with guns, naked strangers, and doppelgangers approach me. And this is all three.
In the forward timeline, Dolores ends up sending all the hosts to heaven and killing Bernard. Back in time, Bernard then makes it to the beach and has a sort of reconciliation and goodbye with Ford, even though this is not Ford, so this conversation is with nobody and it's pointless. I would have said it's remarkably weird that Bernard would forgive a man who made him kill his girlfriend Teresa, made him choke Elsie and abuse her, and was responsible for the deaths of hundreds. But then again, this isn't actually Ford, so Bernard didn't forgive Ford, so who knows. Bernard then scrambles his memories and lies down on the beach, and we recreate the opening of the season. Though they forgot the champagne glass, and the chairs, and they made this 10 days too early, and they didn't give him a reason to be shaking when he wakes up, but otherwise, yeah, they totally recreated the opening of the season.
We then get to guests leaving the park who are still wearing tuxedos after 2 weeks. These people really care about their deposits. Dolores is there and she passes by some of the dead, including Armistice. Did we really need Armistice to survive that last scene of season 1? Didn't seem like she added much, and they never really explained how she found Felix and Sylvester, or why she brought them along with her as captives, or how she got that new robot hand. And that bizarro Japanese Armistice also proved useless. Wait, why the fuck did they even go to Shogun World? What the fuck?
Dolores is then stopped by Stubbs, who pretty much reveals why he's such a massively worthless fuck-up. He's a host and has been working for Ford, which of course creates a whole bunch of problems. Why would he confront Bernard about Teresa first season, or quiz him about Elsie's disappearance, or go down into Basement 83 looking for Ford in the first episode, or look for Elsie's tablet, or protect Charlotte against Dolores? And why was he kidnapped by Ghost Nation before the incident, and why would they let him go? And where are those humans who were with him when he was let go? I think I preferred him being a moron. That at least would explain his randomness.
Anyway, Stubbs lets Dolores go, and then we find out that the man in black has survived. The motherfucker can breathe underwater. He's been also bleeding out of his blown-up hand for at least 24 hours.
Flashing back with Dolores, Dolores puts Teddy in the virtual heaven, and we jump to Felix and Sylvester, who are told to salvage the hosts. And we know they're going to be stupid enough to rebuild Maeve. They have seen nothing but death and violence, but we all know where this is heading. They're that stupid, and we know it.
Hey, wait a minute, weren't they collecting flags and spears and they had that package with them? What happened to that? That didn't go anywhere. And then Dolores leaves and we can see that she put 5 brain balls in her purse, which, if you've been watching these videos, you know I've been saying that Teresa and Charlotte should have done this first season. I even specifically said they should put a brain in their purse. The Teresa Woodcutter and Charlotte Abernathy plots are officially nonsense. Brain balls are portable, and they fit in purses. Anyway, this episode has more false endings than Return of the King. Dolores says that she recreated Bernard again. This is kind of weird, like from memory with Arnold, or did she just bring her brain ball? I hope it's the latter, because the former is really dumb. And of course, we have no real reason for recreating an enemy that's going to fight against her, but it's dismissed as host logic that our puny human minds can't grasp. Some mystery person is put into Charlotte's body, and I think Bernard gets a house? Or maybe he leaves and Dolores keeps the house? I'm not sure. Credits roll, and then we fucking get this shit. They're testing for fidelity in a real-world post-apocalyptic future. Does anyone think there's going to be a satisfying answer to this that makes sense? And the Man in Black's motivation was that he wanted to prove he has free will? That was his mission? Not Ford's door quest? Or to destroy the Forge? Or to make stakes real? Or to act immoral to prove that he's moral? It's to prove he has a choice. If you want to prove you have a choice, order randomly barbacoa instead of carnitas next time you're at Chipotle. You don't need to rescue Lawrence, go to Pariah for an army and then get denied, kill some Confederados for some cousins, randomly fight Maeve, kill your daughter for no reason, team up with Dolores for no reason, and betray Dolores for no reason. Or was that the whole point? Was it to act so fucking random that no one can possibly predict your actions? I mean, if that's the case, no one should be able to predict what just happened this season. In fact, it should be impossible to predict it, since the Man in Black storyline depends on conscious hosts' choices. It depends on Maeve, so unless she had no free will when breaking her programming, you can't predict where the Man in Black would be. Whatever, I'm done thinking about this scene. Night's King out.
I made it! Oh man, this does not look good.
Hello, Chad.
Oh fuck me, what is this?
Do you know where you are?
I don't know, Detroit?
You're in the future, Chad. You've done this over and over. We need to check for fidelity.
I'm in the future? Fuck yeah! I can binge Game of Thrones Season 8 and read The Winds of Winter. Smell you later, Bucket.
Well, fuck.